let's jump right into this explainer, because we are looking at a fascinating critique that literally attempts to dismantle the very foundation of modern linguistics. We're diving into the groundbreaking work of Alim Sbit al-Nili, and he takes one of the most widely accepted ideas in the entire world of language and just flips it entirely on its head. Here's how we're going to break this down. First, the mystery of meaning. Then, Saussure and the arbitrary principle, followed by the contradictions of modern linguistics. After that, we'll look at refuting that arbitrary principle, establishing intentionality, and finally, the inherent meanings in sounds.
So, starting with part 1, the mystery of meaning and language.
This is really the ultimate philosophical debate. When we say a word like horse or mountain, is there an actual, natural, physical link between those sounds and the object itself? Or is it all just a random label that a bunch of people somewhere down the line happen to agree upon? To get to the bottom of this, the author points us way back to the 4th century BC, specifically to Plato's famous Cratylus dialogue. It features this brilliant debate. On one side, you have Socrates, who argued that language naturally imitates nature, that words have a sort of natural fitness to the things they describe. But on the other side, Hermogenes believed names are just habit and convention, purely arbitrary agreements made by humans. And as the source text points out, if you look at history, Hermogenes' view, that words are just completely arbitrary, is the one that eventually conquered modern science.
Which brings us to part 2, Saussure and the arbitrary principle.
The Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure formalized what we now call the arbitrary principle. It's basically the theory that there is absolutely zero internal natural connection between a word, which he calls the signifier, and its meaning, the signified. Al-Nili argues that in mainstream linguistics today, we've taken this incredibly complex, highly logical system of language and bizarrely built it upon a completely illogical, completely random foundation.
To prove his point, Saussure used a really famous example. He argued that the concept of a sister has no internal link to the sound sequence SOR in French or SISTER in English. His logic was that because different languages use entirely different sounds for the exact same object, think both in French versus ox in English, the connection just has to be completely arbitrary. In his view, it's nothing more than an accident of history and geography. Let's move to part 3, the contradictions of modern linguistics.
This is where al-Nili steps in and accuses Saussure of pulling a massive linguistic sleight of hand. The author breaks down how Saussure constantly shifted his terminology to force a connection that his own arbitrary theory actually denies. He started out by looking at a word and its meaning, but to avoid the obvious implication that the two are deeply connected, he morphed those terms into a sound image and a concept, and then changed them again to signifier and signified.
Notice the profound contradiction al-Nili exposes here. Saussure calls language arbitrary, and he specifically calls words signs. But then he actively switches to using the word symbol whenever he desperately needs to imply a logical connection. For instance, Saussure admits that the scales of justice are a symbol, not an arbitrary sign, right? Because you couldn't just replace the scales with, say, a chariot and still represent justice. And yet he tries to build an entire science of language while insisting the fundamental building blocks, our words, are completely devoid of any logic. According to al-Nili, Saussure literally admitted that his foundational principle was illogical. He essentially wrote that the linguistic system rests entirely upon an illogical principle, meaning language lacks a solid logical basis for discussion. Think about that for a second. Al-Nili points out the glaring absurdity here. How can you genuinely study language as a rigorous science if you openly declare its very foundation to be entirely random and totally beyond logic?
And that leads us perfectly into part 4. Refuting the arbitrary principle.
We're really contrasting two massive opposing ideas here. The arbitrary worldview basically sees language as random chaos. The author argues that this approach isn't just linguistically lazy. Historically, it's actually led to intellectual chaos, fragmented meanings, and even the weaponization of language by dividing people over totally subjective meanings. Against all that, he places the intentional worldview, the idea that language is a precise, predetermined system or absolutely nothing is left to chance. This brilliantly illustrates al-Nili's main counterattack. You absolutely cannot build a highly structured, logical system of grammar and syntax on top of pure, random chance. He argues that language is a strict, undeniable system. And, the fact that there are multiple words for one idea across different languages, that's not proof of randomness. It actually just shows that different societies selected different, highly specific inherent sound values to describe different aspects of the exact same thing. The sounds themselves possess a prior physical value before they're even spoken out loud.
Part 5. Establishing the intentionality theory.
Now, al-Nili introduces his groundbreaking alternative, the theory of intentionality. This is the profound idea that sounds and letters possess inherent physical and completely predetermined meanings. He proposes that the actual physical movement of your vocal cords naturally and perfectly dictates the exact meaning of the sound you produce.
Under this intentional worldview, the rules of the game change entirely. First off, sounds have a prior, fixed value based entirely on the physics of articulation. Second, letters act as precise written records of those physical movements. And third, language is entirely intentional. What does that mean for us? It means there are no true synonyms. There are no random labels. Every single syllable is a precise, almost mathematical reflection of reality.
Finally, Part 6. Inherent meanings in sounds. To back this up, the author provides a really detailed physical map of phonetic values. He argues that a sound isn't just arbitrary noise. It's a physical action with a matching conceptual action. For example, the Arabic letter ayn inherently means clarity of movement or manifestation. The letter ra physically represents repetition. So when you combine these sounds, you aren't just making a random word. You're literally combining physical concepts to build a word that perfectly matches the reality of the object you're describing.
Ultimately, the text suggests that underneath all the chaos, all the slang, and the thousands of modern dialects out there lies a pure standard language. In this absolute standard, sounds perfectly match their inherent physical movements. It's a language that perfectly mirrors the physical universe. And not because human beings randomly sat down and agreed on it, but because the very physics of sound demands it.
It leaves us with a truly profound realization. If every single sound holds a hidden physical meaning based on strict intentionality rather than just arbitrary chance, what secrets are we speaking every single day? Language might not just be a random tool we invented to chat with each other. It could be a precise physical code of the universe, just waiting to be fully deciphered. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I hope you keep questioning the true meaning behind the words you use.